Eimear and Ailish star in 2 new videos to discuss the advice that they wish they could give their younger selves, the importance of being kind to yourself in the age of social media, and what they've learned from each other. Delighted to be joined by both of them now. Ailish, I might start with you. Can you give us a sneak preview of what your advice to your younger self might be?
Well, it's pretty much just not be so hard on myself, because I guess as athletes, it's probably something that we do anyway. We are pretty hard on ourselves in general, but I think, struggling with, not being selected in my younger years of sport, and, been super hard on myself for not doing that and achieving as best I could. I think just been a bit kinder and having a bit more patience in terms of, towards myself and that side of things. And even now, sometimes I need that advice, after taking up AFL in the past couple of years. I still need that advice to be kind and patient on myself.
How does that tally with then I presume, the real determination to constantly get better and to try and push yourself?
Yeah, I guess I've always had that drive to, probably because I know the capabilities are there, and sometimes I can fall into the lazy category. So I think having that drive and that will to be better, and knowing that I can be better, and I've always had Eimear to look up to and strive for better things. So I've been quite lucky to have her, throughout my entire career. I've always had someone to look up to, and she's always been, a superstar in her age category and beyond. So, I've been quite lucky to have someone to strive to be better towards, and just been lucky to have that drive.
Eimear, what was if you could tap yourself on the shoulder, first off, what age would you tap yourself on the shoulder that you think would be the most important to go back to and say, okay, this is a little bit that's going to be very useful to you if you just bear this in mind over the next while?
God, I think it was those teenage years. They're a nightmare. Like, I see it every day in school. And I think I was constantly comparing myself to other people and wanting to be other people, wanting to be the ones that were, going out, wanting to be the ones that were doing this and the other. And I'm like, we weren't doing those kind of things. And I was still playing football, and I was delighted that I was, but I always wanted more, and I compared myself to others, and wanted to be more like other people instead of actually just being happy with what I am. And I spoke about it in the Tackle Your Feelings video, but it's more Mam sticking to her morals more than me sticking to my morals. I'd say if I had my way, I probably wouldn't be on this path. She kept us on the straight and narrow, and that was mainly through sport. And
I was going to say how, because that's the bit of information that, like, every parent listening in, their ears are pricking up, going, "Okay, how does that work? What did your mum do?"
It was sport. It was always used as the kind of the pro and con of everything. If you didn't do well enough in an exam, you were going to probably get punished by, not going to a game or not going to a training session. Or when people were going out to the cinema on a Friday night, we were being chauffeured to a camogie training or football training. And if it wasn't camogie and football, she signed us up to athletics. And then when athletics was on off season, it was joining the volleyball team and soccer team over in Connolly Celtic. We honestly, I don't think there was a day of the week free, no matter what sport we did. And it was keeping us in sport and keeping us dedicated to that our mind was solely focused on being good athletes, as opposed to, going out or getting up to mischief or getting up to trouble.
So that obviously worked, Eimear. Like, do you think it would have worked if you weren't good sports people and actually proficient and knew that you guys could?
Yeah, what if you were crap? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
What if you weren't 2 superstars?
Ailish talks about how good I was. I was just brought along to cool camps because Ailish wanted to go. She was always the sporty one, and I was the one who wanted to be doing my hair and playing with Barbies and all that stuff. I was forced along, and it just kind of, I suppose, if you throw enough at the wall, it's going to stick. And it was me. I had to go along, and we were thrown into enough sports. And like I always say, how I've spoken before about this, how the variety of sports that we did allowed us to be where we are right now. And it was down to Mam just filling every day with a different sport or a different hobby.
I mean, you're definitely the perfect model for like a PhD long form study into playing different sports at different stages of your lives, because you're both excelling at different sports right now. So Ailish, what do you put down your abilities to cross sports down to?
I certainly think it's like what Eimear said, that the multiple sports that we played, even as like kids when we were just outside the back in the middle of the countryside where we live, and like we literally would pick up everything and anything. If it was a stick, if it was a ball, whatever shape, size it was, we just literally picked it up and played. And I think having that variety of sport and skill set from such a young age was something that definitely helped my skill set a whole lot. And then obviously dragging Eimear along, it helped her too. So Yeah, and like mum signing us up to every single sport under the sun, whether that was athletics, basketball, volleyball, soccer, football, camogie, whatever we could get our hands on, even baseball, anything. It was kind of just whatever we could get our hands on, we played. And I think that was a massive thing for us to, pick up different skill sets, understand different games, and, probably then excel and specialize once we got a little bit older and when it became too hard logistically to keep up all the sports.
We have an older brother who's 9 years older than us, and he got 2 younger sisters. So we were just going outside kicking with him, and he was so much older than us that like he used to belt the balls at us to try and make us catch them. So he has something to do with it as well. But like I think living in the countryside,
for sure,
having each other and not having much else to do, like we're there's no one around us. You can't walk anywhere. There's no footpath. So we just had to entertain ourselves through. Like we honestly had paint cans. Paint cans and a plank of wood was our hurdles.
Was our tennis
yeah.
And we had go-karts and rollerblades. We used to race around the house, and we literally had everything that we could to try and keep ourselves entertained and active.
So where is the baseball stronghold in County Clare?
That was because our dad he worked in America for years, so every time he used to come home they used to bring us home something American, and he'd land home with a baseball bat and a mitt and a baseball, and we'd throw our hand at everything and anything. The amount of slithers that we would use and baseball that we lost in the fields in the countryside, we'd probably still find some now if we went looking, but I wouldn't say it's a stronghold, but we gave it a go.
Eimear, you talked about seeing it in school. Like, it's obviously completely different now in terms of if you were kids, the chances are you'd be spending larger portions of your day on screens. How do we somehow counteract the power, the magnetic power of social media, which is this kind of very addictive thing that people spend time on, and then also it can be a great thing in terms of information sharing and discovery of the world, but it can also be pretty horrific. I suspect if you're a teenager who is in any way self-conscious, like there's just a violent viciousness to the content that's being posted. So what's your understanding of how that's going at the moment, particularly for the kids that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, like I spoke about comparing myself to others back in my day, but it's so much harder now because you're not just comparing yourselves to the girls that are in your school, you're comparing yourselves to the world, and everything's so available at the click of a button. But I think it's education, and the main thing that we try and do, on Cyber Safety Week, or we get people come in and have talks with them, is just, I suppose, education around, that this isn't real, as in like social media is a highlight reel of someone's life, and people don't put stuff up on the bad days, people don't put stuff up when they don't want to. So I suppose it's just educating them that this is the perfect life and that not everything is going to be perfect. It's hard. Like we're all on our phones 24/7, like myself included. And I suppose you just have to go back and take a step back and realize that not everything is posted up there, and everything that is up there might not be true either. So it's education, but it is, like you said, it's a tough place to be. But I suppose find something that you enjoy that can take your mind away from social media. For us, it probably would have been sport, and I still think sport has a huge part to play in that.
Do we do enough? Like, because education, right? You're talking about leaving it really to teachers, but ultimately that's not going to be enough. Like, you say you're on your phone. I'm constantly on my phone. My kids are giving out to me about being on the phone the whole time, and I'm like, oh, you can't have screens. But like, it's complete hypocrisy because they will do what they see as opposed to what I tell them to do. So what do we need to do? Like, do we need to have a massive public campaign where sporting organisations, media organisations, everybody's actually genuinely addressing this problem? Because I think we probably haven't quite understood just how far-reaching the consequences are going to be.
Yeah, I suppose we don't know the impact it's going to have on the younger generations. We didn't get phones until later in life, but I suppose it's everything though. Like it's not just social media. It's that I want to calculate a test score, I use my calculator on my phone. I want to look up the weather, check my phone. It's so easily accessible at the moment. It's our everything. And I don't know the answer to that. I honestly don't know how you do. I know in the past I've set screen time limits, and you get a notification, and then you actually you're made aware of just how long you spend on social media. I suppose maybe making yourself more aware and putting limits on your amount of time spent on your phone. But it's so readily accessible, and everything is so easily accessible. I think that's the hard part, and I don't have the answers. And if you do, let me know.
Ailish, can we talk a little bit about the AFLW? There's stories in the back of the papers today about uncertainty around when the season is going to start. Do you have any inkling or any sense of what the outcome of this is going to be?
Not an idea, unfortunately, at the moment. We're still pretty much in the dark in terms of a start date, contracts. So literally, while you've seen there's been quite a bit of trade and movement, and between the new clubs and stuff, none of that's signed, sealed, delivered. That's only it's only verbal agreements because we don't actually have a contract to go on. So unfortunately, we were told by the AFL a couple of probably months at this stage that probably early in this year that the season was predicted to change to for an August start date, which means pre-season start date in June. But unfortunately, we haven't had any information beyond that, and we're currently still waiting to hear the negotiations between the AFL Players Association and the AFL in terms of the contract bargaining agreement, which expired this season for us and for the men's. So, we're literally just waiting and seeing what happens.
Everybody's in a sense of limbo at the moment then, and is your sense from kind of being down there that people who have got the Australia experience will, if it comes down to it, pick Australia over coming back and playing inter-county football or whatever they're playing at home, or do you think that it might be a bit more of a split than that?
I think it might have to come to that. I think there will have to be a decision made, and I think the girls that are out here currently giving it a crack, may pursue a more longer term career in AFL, because it is getting more and more professional each year that we go, because they are looking towards getting this competition fully professional between 5 and 6 years. So I think with the time frame change and how that's going to affect playing Gaelic football when we go home and that side of things, it's going to make girls make the decision to either choose, an amateur game back home, or, take the leap and go fully professional out here playing AFL. So I think, unfortunately, we've had a good ride for the past couple of years in terms of having the best of both worlds, been able to go back and play championship and then come back out and play. But I think, as the competition grows and expands, and the talent pool becomes bigger and bigger, it's going to be a tougher decision for the Irish girls back home, and also for the ones that are here too.
Yeah, and exactly, and all the sort of people who've gone to Australia have also got the proper sample of what life is like down there, whereas those people who make the decision at home kind of are in a blissful sense of ignorance, where they can stay at home and say the grass isn't always greener, whereas you've probably experienced just exactly how green it is.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the setup over here is amazing, and it's exactly what you want Gaelic football to be back home. And having seen both sides of the world and both sides of the games, they're very, very different. Like, Gaelic football is not quite at the level, and understandably, because it's not professional, but it's hard to go backwards when you're constantly going forwards in another code. So yes, it is extremely hard to go back to a different level when your own personal standards don't change.
Is this something that we could maybe learn from and embrace? Because it certainly seems as if the men's game was always very suspicious of the best young talent being hoovered up by Australia, and then some of them make it, some of them don't, and there's this kind of like, don't let them come over and take our best players. Whereas maybe the women's game can use this as an injection of players who go for a couple of years, have an incredible life experience, and then come back and bring the learnings with them.
Exactly. It's only going to be good for the game, and to be honest, it's actually a credit to the LGFA and the Camogie Association for any of the girls that play Camogie too. To produce the athletes that they've produced, that were pretty much ready made to step into a semi-pro game straight off the bat, having no experience. So, it's an absolute credit to them. But I think the learnings that we'll take back from a professional setup, even, getting a snippet of the men's side of things, from within the club, and just experiencing the professional side of things when you're within season, it's a whole other world. Like, you fly from game to game rather than get a 5-hour bus trip. It's such a different experience, and I think, of course, anything that we learn over here, we're going to bring back home and expect standards to be better. And I think that's the only way things are going to get better back home for women in sport, whether that's rugby, soccer, football, whatever that may be. So I think girls are only going to bring home valuable experience and life experience, and that can only be a good thing.
Eimear, it's ironic that rugby, which is a professional sport for the last 25 years, is in Ireland still in that scenario that's very similar to the GAA, where most of the team who played for Ireland in the Six Nations all had to go back to work and do day jobs, apart from the Sevens team. So, in your view, at some point in the future, are we going to get to a point where the women's team in Ireland is fully contracted and there's enough strength and depth so that players aren't forced to go off and go back to work the week after big Six Nations games?
Yeah, like I think there's been so many talks, so many conversations about it. And like Ailish said, if it's going that way in the next few years, like I don't see it happening overnight. I see lots of other unions models been taken into consideration, a lot of talks, a lot of discussions. This isn't going to be just made, tomorrow. But it has to go that way. If we're to compete with the likes of France and England, it's essentially a two-tier competition at the moment with the Six Nations, that you have your France and England's, and even at that, England were so far ahead of France the last day that it's scary. The gap that's there. There's almost 3 divisions now. I think in the past I would have thought it was France and England up there themselves, and then the rest. And now it's almost England first, and France behind them, still trying to catch up, and then the rest of us. And I think until we go professional, like you said, it's the depth of players that we need, the players training together in and out, that when players go away, when players get injured, that it's a seamless transition. And that's what it was with England when they lost players. People go down injured, they were able to rotate their squad around an awful amount, these Six Nations. And it was seamless because they'd been so used to playing with each other day in, day out. It's their full-time jobs. And it's the recovery side of things. Like we also, even Max tweet on the Monday after that game, I was after getting a scan on the Monday and I was back into work on the Tuesday on my knee. It's the reality of it is you get more recovery, you get more rehab, you get more physio attention if you're a full-time athlete and you don't have to go into work the next day. But it is, like Aoife tweeted, a reality of everyone that plays rugby in Ireland, if you aren't a student or if you aren't a sevens player. And I suppose it's just the reality that we've had to have for the last few years, but it can only benefit the women's game, whatever sport it is. Like as Ailish said, whatever sport it is, professionalism will benefit us.
It's a vicious cycle as well. I presume being in work the full week before a game makes you more susceptible to injury on top of that.
Do you know what? There's pros and cons. Like I love going into work because it means you're not focusing on the match. You can literally just focus on the task in hand and whatever you are, whatever you're teaching, whatever class you have at the time. And then you can switch on when you get into game mode, because when you are in game mode, you're in on a Wednesday or a Thursday and it's meetings, it's tactics, it's footage, it's gyms, it's double day training sessions. So you are fully in. It's very intense when you are in there. So to actually be able to switch off and go back to work, it actually has positives, and I really find that beneficial. So look, there's obviously benefits to being fully pro, not having to go to work and getting off your feet, recovering, getting more rest, getting more sleep. But then with the switch off side of things, I feel like I'd be constantly thinking about rugby if I didn't have my job. So I like the mix at the moment. It's just interesting to see what will happen in the future.
The whole move to professionalism, if it does take a number of years, Eimear, might be a little bit too late for you, or is there a possibility that maybe you could take a career break if the game goes fully professional? Would that still be something that's on your radar?
Yeah, like every athlete dreams to be a professional athlete. It's like Ailish is one of the lucky few in Ireland that gets to be a professional athlete, and it's something that as a girl growing up we could never have imagined. Yeah, like you said, I am myself and Connor bringing up the age bracket of the group. We joke about that quite a lot. But look, I'll see it as long as I'm still enjoying my rugby. If I still think I'm good enough to be playing rugby, like I'll see. I've made no decisions around that, and hopefully it happens sooner rather than later, so that I do have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I guess over the next little while then as well, there's probably, I guess, the conversation about how that gap actually closes, and like beyond the professional point, Eimear, what would you take away from this year's Six Nations as, I guess, the thing that you can build on ahead of next year and over the next couple of years?
I think if you look at the season and the amount of games that we've played this year, that has been so valuable. Like myself as a player, I've played more games this year than I have ever. And that's because of the structure of the way the AIL was structured, the way obviously we had the World Cup qualifiers as well, but when the World Cup qualifiers were going on, there was the women's interpros, so there was a significant amount of games this season, and we were released back to play to our clubs instead of training or doing camps for Ireland. So the experience you get is invaluable playing games, and you can train, and yes, it's important to gel as a squad, but it's also really important to get that match experience. And like I'm like Ailish, I'm like a lot of the girls I transferred over from another sport, so I'm still learning. I haven't played since I was 12, 13, 14. I took it up at 23, so I'm still learning, and I need those quality games. And a lot of the times in the past, I would have learned things or done things for the first time in an international game. So to be able to do that in a club game and to do those experiences in a club game, and the way they structured the AIL this year with the two conferences, so after Christmas they divided into top 4 and a bottom 4, and that really improved the standard of the game after Christmas heading into the Six Nations. So I really enjoyed that.
All right, Eimear, Ailish, thanks a million for your time this morning.
Cheers, thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks
Eimear
for having us.
and Ailish Considine there on the line with Rugby Players Ireland, Zurich and the Zurich Foundation, talking about the Tackle Your Feelings Schools programme.